last week's episode, you mentioned that silver premiums were rising on a lot of products as much as 50 or 60 cents. I did hear from a couple folks in the industry who felt that they were seeing some premiums go down and didn't agree with what you said. So wanted to just run that by you and see what we could figure out. Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. Happy Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody. We're on Saturday night, so the time you're hearing this, Christmas has passed, and hopefully Santa brought some silver to everybody out there for Hanukkah too, and any other festivities or celebrations someone might be enjoying. And to go along with that action, I'm joined by Andy Schectman of Miles Franklin, as always, for this week's physical silver and gold market update. So, Andy, happy holidays. Great to have you on here again. How's everything going with you?
My friend, it's good to be back. I would be lying if I said I'm not excited for a little bit of rest and relaxation here at the end of the year. Things are going well. It's been one heck of a crazy year, and but it's good to always be here and be back. And of course, we'll look forward to picking up where we left off at the first of the year, or with the first of the year coming up. But yeah, it's glad to be here, and thanks for having me, Chris.
Well, I appreciate that. And Andy, I think you know this. I like to hope that a lot of the people who listen to our show each week know this. You know, you and I also talk about how there are conflicts of interest in the industry out there. Long before I was earning money in any silver-related matter, this is what I was thinking and sharing, and my genuine intention is to find answers and truth, or at least facilitate discussions. So always want to get things as accurate as possible for people. And as you and I discussed before, last week's episode, you mentioned that silver premiums were rising on a lot of products as much as 50 or 60 cents. I did hear from a couple folks in the industry who felt that they were seeing some premiums go down and didn't agree with what you said. So wanted to just run that by you and see what we could figure out.
Yeah, and I respect that. There are some products that the premiums have not gone up on, and maybe I wasn't as clear as I should have been in seeing all premiums rise, but I am seeing premiums tighten on all of the government-issued silver coins, the 1 ounce. Yeah, there are some bars and some bags of junk silver where the premiums haven't taken off yet, albeit I expect them to. But if you look at what the premiums were in the month of November on the government-issued coins, they are all higher than they were, and they are inching slowly higher. So it's one of these deals where it's not like what we saw in March, where all premiums in all metals escalated. But I do believe very strongly that we are beginning to see premiums rise on the government-issued coins. And when you see rumblings like all of the metal is becoming impossible to find for investment purposes in Germany with the coin shops and the coin dealers, precious metals dealers, we will see it here too. I do believe that. And I am seeing a tightness in 1 ounce silver coins issued by government mints, and that's usually where it starts. When the mints run out of product, or product becomes tighter than normal, or premiums start to rise in the government issued coins like the Eagle, the Maple, the Philharmonic, the Kangaroo, those types of coins, when that happens, everything else follows suit shortly thereafter. So again, I don't want to be sensationalist and say the premiums are rising, hurry up. But what I did say, and what I do believe and stick to, is that the premiums are slowly beginning to rise on the government-issued 1 ounce silver coins. And look at all of the retailers out there. Compare what they were, what the premiums were at the end of November to what they are now, and you will see a 40, 50, 60% hike on all of those items from where they were right around Thanksgiving. So I'll stick to it. Not across the board yet, not so much in gold yet, but in 1 ounce silver coins by the 5 or 6 sovereign mints, I would argue they are beginning to tighten and are higher indeed than they were at the end of November.
Well, Andy, I appreciate that. I mean, the answer certainly, but perhaps even more so, that you are accountable, as you talk about in many of your interviews and have said for years. That's one thing that I've always appreciated about you. And I guess we've known each other, I think it's maybe a little over 4 years. We've done a lot of great things. We've had our differences when we drove each other nuts, but I think part of what has always worked is we both feel that same way and we understand the sensitive issues in the industry. So again, my goal is always just to provide the best, most accurate information. I don't think anybody knows all the answers, but is important when I heard that to check in with you. And I appreciate you being willing to discuss that. And just lastly on this topic, I will mention that if anyone still needs any further clarification, you can send an email to Arcadia at Miles Franklin. And whether you need to hear from me or Andy, if you do need to hear directly, again, that is my own personal pledge to maintain doing the best service. Did you have something to say there, my friend?
Yeah, I do. And I'm glad that you said what you did. If I have one fault in this industry, it is for trying to do more than one person humanly can. And my intentions are always very good. I am so proud of our friendship and of our relationship and my affiliation with you for the exact same reason, because you have integrity, you are honest, and I do believe that in fact, I know for a fact that your motivation is to seek truth, to be honest, to tell people what's really happening. And really, you have a lot of people on your show that are far more knowledgeable on economic fundamentals than I am. All I really want to get across is that I'm very hardworking and that I try my best to research what I speak of, and that I'm honest, and that I am going to always be genuine in the things that I say, because quite frankly, that's the most important thing to me. In a world where integrity and honesty is a fleeting memory in some cases, that's my strong point, and I believe it's your strong point. And so for what it's worth, Chris, and for all of you out there listening, I couldn't be more proud of my affiliation with Arcadia Economics and my friendship with you, Chris Marcus. And just like any relationship, there's a give and take. And I have at times bitten off more than I can chew. Those types of issues have been long since addressed and resolved, and I have a team of people who are helping me with my lofty ambitions and endeavors. But for what it's worth, I thank you. It's been a great year. I consider you one of my very dearest friends in this industry and in life. And I am very honored to associate Miles Franklin with a fine institution like Arcadia Economics, someone who speaks the truth and is honorable. And those are the only kind of people that at this stage of my career and of my life that I really choose to associate with. And you've opened my eyes to many things, and I thank you for that, truthfully. So not to get too far off the beaten path, but I think it's important to note that I appreciate you very, very much.
Well, likewise. And I guess just one more question on the premiums then before we move on. You mentioned Germany, which there was, I don't know, just reading these headlines sometimes. We'll get to that. But can you just give folks an example, whether it's the Eagles or the Maple Leafs or whatever would best put in context, and maybe some actual numbers, like the premium was here a month ago and here's what it is, just so people can get a clear idea of where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the Eagles right now, just about every single online company will be north of $4 an ounce over spot on, and that would be on large quantities of silver Eagles. If you look at the same thing with silver Maple Leafs, just about everyone right now is going to be about $3.50 to $4 over spot on silver Maple Leafs. I would argue that leading up to Thanksgiving, those were all substantially lower. I saw silver Eagles that were being sold at for $3.65 over spot, and silver Maple Leafs being sold for just just under rather $3, $2.99 over. The Kangaroos and the Krugerrands were all being sold for somewhere under $3, and now they're all over $3. So, you know, it's a situation where the premiums can change in the blink of an eye, but in particular, now I don't have the numbers in front of me what they were exactly, but I will tell you that the Kangaroos, the Krugerrands, the Eagles, and the Maple Leafs, in just about every single case across the board, are up 50 to 60 cents per ounce, which is 3 to 4% from where they all were at the end of November. There are some things that have come down a bit, junk silver, and that's why we've been offering it on special, because the premiums have been really, really attractive. And that's why, you know, 2 out of our last 3 specials have been related to junk silver. And what I would like to, our year of the end special, our last special here today, will be bags of junk silver at $1.39 over spot, dimes and quarters. Last week or the week before, it was the half-dollar bags at $1.75. So in some cases, they have come down, and that's one area, junk silver. But really, it's pretty much the only area. When I look at what online companies were selling, especially on the Black Friday and Cyber Week, that whole week at the end of Thanksgiving, they were selling coins 3 to 5% less than they are now, easily, if not more. So, you know, it's an area where it hasn't spilled into everything, but it will. And right now it is tightening up in the government issued coins. And here's the thing. The government issued coins represent the majority of what is purchased in this industry. And if the government issued coins run into a problem like we saw in March, that's what ignited the entire supply chain problem. All of a sudden, you have the mints shut down and the refineries shut down, and nothing was coming in from any of the government-issued mints. When that happened, premiums on everything went to the moon, including junk silver, including silver bars, including gold coins. So, you know, you have a supply chain that consists of 6 primary mints: United States and Canada. Those are the only 2 in North America. And then you have Australia, Austria, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. Well, we know what's happening in the UK with the new mutant virus and the second lockdown. You know, Australia has had problems with locking down, although they've been a constant source of supply. But the bottom line, really, with supply is that if these 6 mints run into problem, like we've seen repetitively over the last dozen plus years, when that happens, everything shoots up. And the precursor to it is tightening in premium on them. And I'll say this, if you look at what the premiums are right now, Chris, on a Silver Eagle at $4 an ounce on big quantity. Now, I've been selling them for right around that price on any quantity. But if you look and go to the online companies, they're all going to be around $4. For anyone to say premiums are soft, I challenge you to go look and see what they were for the last decade. That you could have bought Silver Eagles any time over the last 10 years, and it would have been easily $1 plus premium less than it is now. Easily, if not $1.50. So all of this proper perspective, you know, premiums have come down, but from where? From ridiculous lofty levels that we saw earlier in the year? Hell yeah. They have. But to say that I'm wrong, I challenge anyone out there listening to tell me I'm wrong when you take a look at premiums today versus where they are 1 year ago today. You go back before the shit hit the fan with Corona, and silver Maple Leafs all day long would have been $1.85 over spot. Silver Eagles all day long would have been, I don't know, $2.65 over spot, something like that. So you were able to buy Eagles and Maple Leafs and all of these other coins for easily $1 to $1.50 cheaper per ounce than they are being sold for right now. So it's all relative. So they've come down from ridiculous levels, but they've never gone back to where they were pre-December 2020. Not even close. And I would argue they're 5 to 10% higher across the board than they were for the last decade. So, you know, it's a somewhat of a subjective answer or question, but you know, yeah, they're lower than they were earlier this year. They're much higher than they ever were, and I'm seeing them starting to move higher again in certain select areas. It's like inflation. Inflation isn't everywhere. It's in certain select areas: tuition and healthcare and energy and food. At some point, inflation finds its way into the entire system, and so too will higher prices here. And you know, when you see silver make its high in August and trend down for the last several months, well, that's part of the reason the premiums have come down, because demand has gone down slightly since August. And I would also say to you that it's been trending back up here towards the end of the year, putting tightness on supply, and some areas of supply are beginning to tighten and premiums go higher from a low point this year, but much higher from where they were over the last decade.
Well, Andy, I appreciate that. Thank you for shedding some color on that. And again, anyone still has any unanswered questions, want to be accountable, make sure they can get that. You can email at Arcadia at Miles Franklin. If you need to speak with me or Andy, we will make sure that gets taken care of. Anyway, Andy, on to a couple of other stories we have going on here. I'm sure a lot of people saw that story from GATA last week, a news report of big lines, and they had the title "Run on Gold and Silver in Germany." I don't know, is a run, maybe I should be a little more careful because that's a word that has a lot of connotations, but did you see that, and any thoughts? And perhaps, I know you obviously talk with people around the world, have you anything you're hearing on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly what I'm talking about. This year has been, if I had to characterize most of the year, you know, there's so many ways to characterize what this year has been to so many people. To me, the light of my business, I would call it the Great Awakening, that there has been an awakening by people who have never thought about buying precious metals. And, you know, Rick Rule often talks about a 0.5% allocation to precious metals across the entire investment matrix, with a mean being 2.5%, an average since 1980 being 2.5%. We're in essence 5 times lower than that, until what seems to be an awakening this year by mainstream. I mean, look at what's happening to Bitcoin, awakening to the need to divest of fiat currencies and to find alternatives. And when you look at the amount of currency that's been created, whether it be in the Eurozone, it's astronomical. And some of that money flowing into mainstream investment ideology starting to find its way into precious metals. It doesn't take much from the mainstream to really start to wreak havoc on supply. And if we saw a regression to a 2.5% mean average over the last 30 years to precious metals, that's a 5-fold increase at a period of time where light is being shined upon or shown upon all of the problems in fiat currency and in the economies, and the problems that have been created through the government's reaction to Corona. So look, when you start to see places like Germany run out of precious metals, that means that they can't find it in Switzerland. That means they can't find it in their normal supply chains throughout Europe. That's what we saw in 2008. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but in 2008, when all the product disappeared in a matter of days, when the price of silver went from 21 to 9, you don't have to be a genius to know that if the price of something falls by 60%, that there can't be much demand for it. In fact, there has to be no demand for it. People are dumping supply left and right. When that happened, every major mint in the world was sold out of product for the entire second half of 2008. The Rand Mint sold out of product for the first time in 60 years. The Perth Mint shut down in August. The US Mint was shut down 6 or 7 times in 2008, and the Austrian and the Canadian Mint being 12 to 14 weeks backordered and working 24 hours a day underscored just how crazy things were. But what stuck out to me, maybe more than anything back then, were the repetitive phone calls I got from dealers in Germany saying they could not find anything in their local supply chains throughout Europe. Can you please help me and sell me anything? And I'd never spoken to these people before, ever. I had no idea who they were, but companies in Germany. So I guess you're seeing an awakening by people who are chasing a very, very thinly traded asset class. A tiny, tiny bit of normal demand, which is 0.5 of 1%, is now growing. And it doesn't take much. 1%, 1.5%, that's a 2 or 3-fold increase in an industry that isn't used to that. And so in an industry that continually runs into supply chain problems in good years, in normal years, every single year, it seems by November we're running out of supply, the mints are, challenged to keep up with supply, repetitively being the model of inefficiency. If you see an awakening by people looking to protect themselves, frightened by the lack of viable places to safely put your money, it won't take long to see that happen world over. So I've said on several of our last interviews that I do believe, and I stick to it, that the market ultimately will define itself by an inability to source product. And I think that will be the case. And I'm not saying it's happening right now. I'm just simply saying that I see premiums on 1 ounce US, Canadian, South African, Australian, UK silver coins beginning to rise. And whether it's the beginning of a trend or not, I think that it wouldn't surprise me one bit at all if it was. And we see premiums start to move much, much higher again, as people are looking for viable places to put their money in a world of distorted asset prices. Silver, to me, is not only the most undervalued, distorted, but also probably the investment opportunity of a lifetime. And so I look closely at it, and I am seeing that they're beginning to rise. So I guess we'll have to see how it all plays out. But to me, supply and demand are really central to what I'm focusing on moving forward, and that I believe there will be much greater demand from people who have never thought about buying metals, and supply will become very tenuous and really be a central theme in, I think, this industry and what it can offer to the public.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. Andy, you mentioned the demand in there. While you were saying that, reminded me of something one of our guests said last week. I don't know if you caught Jorge Ganosa from Fortuna Silver. Was talking about how the Silver Institute has this projection of a 318 million ounce deficit of silver in 2020. That's their projection, so factor that in as you will. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting as I'm talking to him. I don't know, sometimes I'm a little slow, and a lot has happened quickly this year, but it's hitting me where here we have this silver industry, not a ton of companies out there. Somehow I'm in the fortunate position. I get to talk to the people who run them, and it's like, here's a vital commodity. And it's like, well, this is one of the guys going to be counted on to figure out how to meet that deficit. And I asked him, well, how's that going to work out? And he's like, well, that's a good reason why the price is going to have to go higher, because he mentioned how there's certain projects they have that get turned on at different levels. Yeah, you can get more silver, but if someone has a mine that's $27 cost of production, it doesn't get turned on until you pass that. And the other thing that he said was that to him, what really drives it is that, yes, you have the industrial demand and, it's growing and somewhat static. Obviously, maybe this year has been a bit of an outlier there. But he said what really drives the price is the times where you have the investment demand kick up, which we've talked about plenty this year. And I appreciate your indulgence in some of my questions that get a little long and mix multiple topics. But with all that said, I saw a headline today that Mitch McConnell and the gang are agreeing, it looks like, on $900 billion stimulus package. They want to send out bigger checks, get more money to businesses that have been hurt. I translate that as they want to send money to the banks in some form of bank stimulus that won't help the public at all. We'll leave that aside, though, but how is that going to be funded, and how does that tie in with what Jorge Ganosa said about the investment demand?
Well, first I'm going to say maybe it's just a complete and total coincidence, but do you know how many ounces of silver were taken off the COMEX this year, by the way? Try 313 million ounces. Kind of
Andy,
interesting that it's, yes.
Just one other, actually, this was one other point I wanted to clarify because I know what you were saying, although just to be completely accurate, in terms of deliveries versus metal being taken off the COMEX, my interpretation of the data is that while there have been record amounts of deliveries, we have not yet seen metal leave the building. And I just wanted to make sure we're using the correct terms on that.
Right, and your client, the gentleman you had on your show discussed that and spoke about how once they are delivered, they are attached with a warrant and they do not belong to the COMEX any longer. They cannot take those in terms of rehypothecation or in terms of force majeure. And so it's one and the same thing to me, I guess. Maybe there's still a little too much trust in the system. But the people who have taken delivery, that metal belongs to them and is no longer part of the COMEX inventory to be sold. So you're right, that is exactly true. But also it is important to note that when they are delivered, they come with a warrant saying this is now yours and is not part of the stock of registered precious metals to be sold. Anyways, I find it interesting that they're almost the exact same amount. The deficit is almost the exact same amount as what has been delivered, and that's just a coincidence, I'm sure. But I find it interesting. And I was looking at the stimulus, and I find the whole stimulus thing really being one of the key differences this year to anything I've ever seen before, where the market needs to get continuing doses of stimulus to stay functioning. It just seems like a drug addict who needs more and more heroin to stay alive and to stay awake without going into convulsions. And is it right to give more heroin to the person who thinks he or she needs it so that they can feel normal for a little while, or should they let them go through the cleansing process and become sober, as painful as it may be? I would argue that's a debate for a different time. But you know, $600 to just about every person, what good does that really do? I mean, yeah, it might help a little bit, but really, what good does it do when 35% of all small businesses in the United States don't know how they're going to pay their rent in December? $600 is a Band-Aid on an open wound, a big open wound. But, you know, I find it to be frightening that it seems a constant theme of stimulus, which is a fancy way of saying printing money and giving it to people, and who does pay for it? That's the question. And who pays for it? We all do. It's a tax, and it's also watering down of the money supply. It's further watering down of the value of the U.S. dollar. The continuing stimulus to get lower and lower and lower amounts of economic utility is very frightening, and I think it sends us down a very bad path. Now, there are a lot of people who need it. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just simply saying that it's the wrong thing to do on a habitual basis, where you continue to print money that you don't own, go further and further into debt, bankrupting our future generations to placate people right now who are hurting. I get it, but what happens down the road? What kind of effect does that have? The continuing debasement of our currency. What effect does that have? And I think most of the people listening to this realize that we're stealing from our children and our grandchildren, and it's putting the United States in a position of weakness rather than of strength. We used to be the country with the largest surplus. Now we're by far the largest debtor nation the world has ever seen, and it doesn't seem like we're learning from our mistakes. And markets that need ever increasing doses of stimulus ultimately are going to end badly. And so I see it, I understand it, and for some people I think it's important. People that are hungry and can't buy food, and I understand it, I get it. But I think in the long run, it is weakening our country. With every dose of stimulus, it weakens us that much more, and ultimately makes precious metals a better place to be when you see an outright monetization or destruction of the US dollar through repetitive printing and stimulus. I think it leads to a bad place.
Well, it certainly doesn't seem ideal, although as you were saying that, I love that I get to do a show where marketing is involved, because I just thought up the $600 stimulus silver special. Maybe we can cook up something where people could like just sign the check, send it in, get silver back. So because Andy, you mentioned Habitual, and because here it's interesting. If you remove a little more space dust on this article, it says the measure is characterized as an emergency bridge through the first quarter of 2021. President-elect Joe Biden and leaders of both parties have said they intend to revisit COVID-19 relief in the new year. Nancy Pelosi called it a first step. So again, this is my interpretation, factor that in as you will, but it seems like 900 billion. And Andy, I'm guessing, I'll bet you a couple ounces of platinum. I'll take the over on 900. You want the other half of that?
Sure.
You're gonna take
absolutely. No. Heck no. I thought you wanted to split it. No, absolutely not. It's going to be way over. Absolutely not.
I'll be careful. Maybe someone in our audience is a lawyer and can find out if we can start making prop bets on the show of glorious things like that. But anyway, I'm guessing it's going to be over 900 billion. But back to the quote there. This sounds like, and we're recording on Monday, December 21st today, and they said through the first quarter, it sounds like 900 billion is a pop for 3 months.
Well, and remember, Chris, it took this country almost 300 years to create 800 billion in wealth. And now they're spending 900 billion like it's no big deal. We've created I believe it's right around 30% of every dollar in circulation was created this year. M1 is going off the charts. So, and that's the most immediate cash and currency and coin, and it's going off the charts. The amount of money that is being created is stealing purchasing power from everybody else. And the continuing stimulus and efforts by the Fed to prop things up through quantitative easing and money creation at some point finds its way out into the real economy. And when you have fewer and fewer people being productive and more money created and stimulus given, that sows the seeds for hyperstagflation. And I think it's very, very scary what is coming. So I talked to a guy today, who calls me. He's a financial advisor. He says, I wanted to talk to you about getting my clients involved in precious metals. And through the conversation, he says, I'd like to buy some from you myself, Andy. He says, but I've blown through all my savings. He says, I have 2 other businesses on top of being a financial advisor. And one of them just went bankrupt. And I spent all of my savings trying to keep it afloat and care for my employees who I care so much about. And I've lost everything. How many people are like that right now? How many people are hanging on by a thread? The restaurant owners, the bar owners, the people who own apartment buildings, strip malls. I have a client in Detroit who owns so many strip malls and so many small buildings where small entrepreneurs and businesses reside, and he's giving, very wealthy man, and he's giving free rent. But how many people that before they themselves? Systemic reaction to all of these bankruptcies that are coming, those that have just been hanging on by a thread. The people who spent all their money buying 2 or 3 Snap Fitnesses that are now empty, or the hair salon, or any of these places that are the backbone of this country. 100,000 small businesses gone forever. in this country. 30% of them can't pay their December rent. We are entering a very, very, very bad place. So you have less people working and producing stuff and more money being created and given out freely. That's a very, very, very bad recipe. And that sets the stage for more bad things, because at some point, if you have all of these people who have spent everything trying to hang on, they can't rebuild. They can't come back from the ashes because they have nothing to rebuild from. And so at what point does this just become an everlasting cycle of stimulus? You know, someone who really shaped my thinking
Andy,
for a very long
I
time.
think we're past that point.
Well, yeah, we are past that point. And you know what? There's someone, for your older listeners out there, you always tell me how old I am. Richard Russell was in many ways my mentor, and someone who I learned more from Richard Russell in his daily writings, the Dow Theory Letters, than just about anyone or anything I've ever learned in 30 years in this industry. And he had a mantra many years ago saying the Fed had no choice but to inflate or die. And that really is where we are at. It is either inflate or default. And now we are accelerating that factor incredibly so with all of this stimulus that never used to happen. Sure, there were entitlement payments, but now you're talking a single bout of stimulus that's more than all the entitlements put together. And it's what, our third one this year, and continuing. And when does it end? How does it end? What happens when you stop giving the addict his continual, shot of heroin? What happens when the heroin addict starts to go through trying to go sober? What happens to the economy? What happens to the person? They go through convulsions, they get very sick, and it's incredibly painful. And it's going to be so here too at some point. Either that or they destroy the value of the currency altogether. And then you get into the $1 million question. We have bonds trading at 0.7% or 0.8% on the 10-year benchmark by a country who is continually running massive levels of inflation and is already insolvent. So at what point, if they continue to create stimulus out of nowhere, just print it into existence or hit a key and digitally create it out of nothing, at what point does the rest of the world who's been financing our exorbitant standard of living by buying our bonds say, screw it, I'm not buying a bond that is paying me 70 basis points when inflation is minimum of 200 basis points and probably a whole lot higher, issued by a government that continually is running massive amounts of inflation. 26%, I think, is the number. As I mentioned, I think it was off by about 4%. I think it's 26% of every dollar ever created was created this year. At what point does the rest of the world say, screw the US and their bonds and their currency, and they just look elsewhere? And that's why Bitcoin is doing what it is doing. Now, people will say, well, why isn't gold and silver doing that? I do believe it will. I believe they have been holding whoever they are, big money, big institutions, commercial banks, central banks, have been controlling the price so that they can all reposition and accumulate massive quantities of it. And you can see that by not only the deliveries on COMEX, 6, 7, 8 times more than we've ever seen, but also the repatriation of all the metals, starting in 2017 with the Bundesbank, the reclassification of gold. All of the things that we have seen this year, to me, point to repositioning by the elite, and reclassification of gold only underscores that tremendously to me. But the central theme being big money repositioning and taking possession or pulling out of harm's way. So I don't know, Chris, I really truly do believe that all of these actions that we are taking will have severe consequences down the road. Either that or they'll just default on the whole thing and start over. And there are a lot of people who believe that'll happen, that the whole purpose of this exercise is to squeeze as much out of this current fiat system as they possibly can before the whole thing busts, and then they start over. And when you see so many people that are now really a servant of the state, that without this stimulus, they just suffer. Without unemployment, they just suffer. without entitlements. They just suffer. At what point does the whole thing just break? And it seems as though we're just accelerating rapidly down that path. And so I think that, aside from the fact that I sell precious metals, one of the things that has made me successful is trying to be as objective as I possibly can. And when I look at things objectively, I don't see any real good out for the path that we have taken, because the minute they stop with the stimulus, and the minute they stop with low interest rates and easy money and quantitative easing, everything blows up. The markets are already as overvalued as they've ever been by every metric. They crash. People are already cash strapped and starving. They die. At what point does the whole thing just blow up? What is the path to going back to normal, if there is such a thing? And we're so far down a rabbit hole, I would argue that that path has never been darker and more difficult to find than ever before.
Well, there's the optimistic spirit. Although, I guess on the other hand, it is interesting that the most common comparisons of how people describe the U.S. monetary system are a heroin junkie or a Ponzi scheme. So, I guess that is what it is. But
it seems that way. It really does.
Well, I mean, it's just so wild to be living through it while it's actually happening. I mean, I remember when I started getting into this early on. Every once in a while, I'd run across a YouTube video or a book of one of these guys who was seeing this back in the 80s, and was like, wow, I wonder what it must have been like to imagine this in slow motion. Although even if you bought gold back in the 80s even at the peak of 850, you're still all right, let alone if you
know what the difference is, Chris? The difference is in 1980, we had real journalism and we had integrity in the media. You didn't have to go to a guy like you and dig to find truth. And I think one of the most startling things about where we are right now is how this entire media complex is not telling the people the truth. And they're pushing people herding people into the pen in traditional asset classes, and or feeling as though that they have to embrace a socialist agenda in order to survive, that they're destroying everything this country stands for. And so the media is at fault more than just about anyone other than the government who prints the money, for no one having the courage to stand up and tell the truth. And conversely, so many people who will understand what I'm going to say right now, and that is that the people who listen to you, the people who buy from me, they feel like they have a horn in the middle of their forehead when they talk to their family and their friends. And they are made to feel a fool. They are made to feel a doom and gloom and conspiratorialist, because the media does not speak the truth. The media has not even spoken about all the election fraud. And it should be everything that they're talking about. The media doesn't talk about the fact that Social Security is $50+ trillion in debt. The media doesn't talk about the fact that our country is north of $100 trillion in debt. And a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. The media doesn't talk about anything except their hatred of Trump. And so what you have is a whole group of people that are very well read reading the wrong stuff, and therefore ignorant as hell as it pertains to what's happening. And they will all be led down the wrong path. And that's really the point in all of this, where you have to trust your gut and you have to listen to people who are speaking the truth. And that's why I'm proud to be associated with you. And that's why I get emails every day from people saying, if your YouTube or Chris's YouTube gets delisted, please keep me informed. Because even people who are trying to tell the truth are now being shamed into believing we're doing something wrong. And that's the point, Chris, is that, people just are uninformed. They may be intelligent, but they're uninformed, and making them ignorant. Not unintelligent, just ignorant to the truth. And that's really the uphill battle we face. That's why it's so hard, I think, because I have people that I trust a lot and that I love a lot, like my sister. She's maybe the most well-informed person I know, just reads the wrong thing. She's brilliant. but her and I have completely different viewpoints on life. She's hard to debate because she's so well read from the mainstream. Yet everything I would argue that she's reading is biased, slanted, and false. So anyways, I digress. But I think that's a big problem that we have nowadays, is just that most people are uninformed to what's really happening. And it makes it a challenging endeavor to have the beliefs that we do. Anyone who's tried to help their family buy precious metals or friends knows exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm sure you do too. So I digress.
Well, I'll digress right with you there. It sounds like David Morgan is on the show. It's one of my favorite things about David. I love, I think it'd be like a fun game. Buy some silver every time he digresses. It's one of his favorite words. And I say that lovingly, big fan of David. And so I will digress now, if I may, and say that it reminds me of what you said about my father, because really smart guy. Although the last 20 or so years of his life after he'd retired, I mean, his routine basically consisted of reading the New York Times every day. And, you know, he'd watch the news. And, I mean, again, he was a brilliant man, yet he had a very centric focus of where he was getting his information from, which for a long time, I guess we all thought was okay. And Andy, maybe the one part where I'd see slightly different than you is we say, yeah, now you have to go on YouTube or find a channel to get. Maybe it was always like that, because I remember growing up, I had channels 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. You know, we didn't have cable at home, and this was before the internet. I'm not quite in your demographic yet, Andy, so no one date on that. But it's interesting, before you had something like the internet where information could be shared as quickly as it was, I mean, maybe things were always this distorted and always this warped, and it was just easier to get away with it. Because it's like I would notice how my dad would see things, especially when I was started getting into gold and silver, and then especially once I told him that I was leaving Wall Street. Now, here's a man that, you know, he would sit there and rant about the banks, these guys and their crime and this and that, so he couldn't stand it. Yet when I said that I was actually doing what I was doing to at least do whatever I could figure out if there was anything to be done about it, he actually was like really upset and was yelling at me because it was so trapped in that indoctrinated way of thinking where you go to school, you get good grades, you go to college, you fall in line with the system, and it was just so foreign to him. And that's perpetuated throughout the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, all this stuff, which, I mean, again, I'm not trying to be critical of other news sources. I'm just trying to be honest. My own personal belief, maybe is correct, maybe is not, is that a large coordinated effort to get people thinking a very specific and certain way, which is then exploited. So it's like on both hands, I get it. I always felt grateful. I was like, why was it me that saw some of this stuff as opposed to the people around me? So I'd like to think it somewhat quickly got away from saying, oh, the sheeple, or how come this idiot doesn't get this? I remember the first time I saw an End the Fed sign, interestingly, it was when I was still trading options, and I went to our Chicago desk. There was a guy there that was a Ron Paul fan, and this, again, was before my Austrian awakening, and I saw End the Fed. I'm like, what kind of idiot could think something that stupid? And so it's like I realize I've been there. We've grown up inside this distorted fishbowl that somewhat resembles Biff's world from Back to the Future 2. And, you know, I appreciate that, you know, what you mentioned, and that people are saying, like, how can they stay tuned? In fact, I do have an update on that, because I'm very grateful for YouTube, and I love what it's facilitated, and there's great things it offers, yet to the degree of everything you spoke about. And we've seen people that speak about certain topics and things happen, and that's something I thought a lot about. And anyways, just interesting what you say about the news. Because,
and I think about that too all the time, Chris. Like, if I didn't go into this profession, I talk about this with my wife and my father, and if we didn't go into this profession 30 years ago, we would probably think the way everyone else does. Look, everyone is working so hard just to make their mark on life, to make a living and take care of their family, leave some semblance of a legacy, keep everything together in these crazy, challenging times. It's exhausting. And most people have to work harder. Now you have to have two people working in a family to keep things going. And, you know, when you come home.
Designed and documented CIA initiative, I might add on that one.
Well, right. And so, you know, when everyone is exhausted at the end of the day and they come home and they still have to make dinner and clean the house and do homework with their kids, okay, now you look up at the clock, it's 8:30 and you're still wearing the clothes that you went to work in. You just finished dinner, you're cleaning up the mess, your kids need some help with homework, and you're so tired you can't keep your eyes open. What are you going to do? Are you going to sit down and you know, especially the world we grew up in, are you going to sit down and scour the Wall Street Journal and as your only source of information? Probably not. But nowadays, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to hopefully listen to some podcasts or read some writing from Doug Casey or, you know, I mean, the point of it is that it takes so much effort to find the truth. And you have to dig, and you first have to be incentivized to dig. You have to be alerted to the fact and open enough to accept it. But then once you do, and you know, all of the media that we're being indoctrinated with left and right tells us a different story. So if you are open-minded enough just to finally dig, it takes a modicum of effort. Now, granted, you do all of the heavy lifting, and now people can learn so much just by listening to you and your guests for 15 minutes. And I tell my employees that if they're not spending a couple hours a week staying on top of, and I list you and several other outlets, that they're making a massive mistake. And because as someone like myself and you'll understand this, when you just to stay abreast of what's happening with so many changes, it's a full-time job. I spend 2-3 hours a day every day just trying to read. Yeah, you have to. And if you don't, you fall behind. And that's the point. So after working so hard all day long and doing all the things just to get your day in order, who has the energy to continue to dig and learn and make themselves better? Most people don't. And that's why so many people don't get it and won't until it's too late. Those that have the means and desire to and the open-mindedness to look at alternatives, listen to it, see the logic, and then draw the line are really the pimple on the elephant. And those are the people who we've been talking to for the last 30 years. I will tell you, though, that this year, more than any other in 30 years, the group of people we are speaking to has expanded. And that's very good. And you can see that with Bitcoin, too. So maybe we are entering a period of time where there will be pushback to taxation and vaccination, pushback to stimulus and destruction of our currency and our way of life through socialist agendas and things that never would have been accepted when our grandparents were walking around as young men and women that are now being embraced and pushed and shoved down our throats collectively. So it's a new time, and it's, you know, the old adage of the more things change, the more they stay the same is even being challenged. And, you know, I still think this is the finest country in the world, but I'll tell you, we are heading down a path where I'm beginning to wonder if it'll be that way when my children are my age. So I guess only time will tell, Chris. But again, when I talk about owning gold and silver, it's not to become wealthy. It's return on your investment that everyone is focused on. I'm more focused on return of my investment. And I think it is the safest place to put your money in a world of uncertainty. Look, as I've said before, gold and silver have been wealth for almost 6,000 years, outliving every pandemic, every German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, all the world wars, everything. And there aren't really any other asset classes where you can say that about. So I think we're doing the best we can in a world of imperfect choices and great uncertainty, and that's really the best you can do these days.
Yeah, although that's pretty darn good. One quick note, I mentioned before, I don't remember the documentation. I'm guessing multiple people in our audience know it, but as I recall it, there was some specific initiative that one of the goals of inflation, and I believe this was documentation from the CIA, was that you had a two-pronged effect. A, you would force two people into the workforce, so you could now tax two incomes, and then B, that you would have, as a result, the mother or whichever parent would have been home to raise the children now was working, and the kids get sent into these, I love how Jeff Berwick used to call it, public indoctrination camps, where suckers like me would do affirmations to the US government called the Pledge of Allegiance, or read Rothschild's textbooks about how Columbus discovered America, especially now living in Texas, previously living in Colorado or going through New Mexico. I wonder what some of the Native American tribes and families who got slaughtered by the Europeans that showed up there, how they feel about that Columbus story, or let alone, Andy, you ever hear how in our textbooks they call it the Mexican-American War? I have confirmed this in the Mexican textbooks. It's known as the American Invasion. So again, I think what you're saying about the sources of information, to me, it's been mind-blowing how much as I've really made an effort to change that in my life. I got rid of my TV in 2011, and I can feel the difference of not being assaulted, thinking I'm a loser because my paper towels aren't as absorbent as yours, or that I'm not getting the best rate on my mortgage as the Fed prints more money. Anyway, Andy, it's been fun talking tonight. It's been a great year. Been a great year for silver, despite coming down a little bit over the last couple months. Silver in the 20s, and I think a lot of hope for the people who've been following the metals. Certainly, I don't. It's not like we're advocating for the Fed to do what it's doing, or for Mitch McConnell and his buddies to just spend like drunken sailors and print it. But to the degree that, and more I think about it, life is always going to, if you just see it like a video game, they're always going to do what they're programmed to do, yet it's when we change our own internal things. One last note before you give your silver special, I just continue to think more and more about how one of my biggest growth steps this year was changing the silver price got smashed, these fuckers, and then being pissed off for the rest of the day, which certainly I was a master of for a long time. But now where, again, for me, it was a little different building a business and not having an income for a while. But now it's like, all right, if it goes longer, then I will buy more. If it happens tomorrow, and again, everyone maybe doesn't have to see it this way, but in some way, letting it be a peaceful part of your life and just saying, all right, we see what's happening. Now here's another 900 billion for a couple of months. God knows what's going to come next after that. So anyway, it's been an interesting year. We had a lot of fun at Silverfest, planning some cool things for 2021. And with all of that said, Andy, I got to warn you, I know you have a silver special, and they're usually great, although I'm going to one-up you today because I have a silver special of my own, but you go first, and let's hear what you got.
Absolutely. Following up on, and by the way, Chris, it has been great. I love you like a brother, and I appreciate everything, and I look forward to another great year in 2021 with you and your listeners who are so amazing, and I've gotten to know a lot of them and very appreciative for that. We're following up on, the need for utility and flexibility, following up on the $50 sale that we had with you last few weeks. We'll do bags of dimes and quarters pre-65 at $1.39 over spot. And that is the best price I've offered them for all year long. And that's why some people may think prices haven't gone up on everything. They haven't on this. They have on many other things. So to me, from a standpoint of upside potential, flexibility, utility, the whole 9 yards, bang for the buck, this is as good as it gets. So bags of pre-65 junk silver at $1.39 over the price of silver. And that is just for Arcadia price. We're not publishing it anywhere else.
Well, Andy, I appreciate that special. That duly does require oven mitts even to dial the phone because it's that hot. Although along the lines of what you said earlier about people wanting to be kept informed, seeing other channels get pulled down, at least to that degree, for all those people who've expressed that or sent messages saying that they really love the stuff that we're bringing, thank you so much. It's been wonderful sharing it. And as we've been thinking of ways to make it easier, if you want to make sure, and I also know a lot of people mention sometimes, even though they're subscribed, they don't get the notifications or anything like that. So for anyone who would like to receive, we do send these out via email, and we're getting it so that in a couple of weeks, like right before the show airs, you get an email saying, hey, it'd be like Saturday night, here's Andy Schectman's broadcast. So if you'd like to receive that and stay in communication with all the things and the people we're meeting and doing here, we wanted to do something fun, get some more silver out into the world while doing this. So there's a link in the description field below, and you can enter there. Someone is going to win a 10-ounce silver bar. Andy, did we decide what would be a great New Year's present for one lucky winner in our Arcadia family? That's a good 10-ounce.
So we do have some really, really nice 10-ounce bars. I'm sure I could find a Royal Canadian Mint 10-ounce bar or a Sunshine Mint 10-ounce bar. I think we probably even have something even nicer than that. We might be able to find one or two of the 10-ounce Canadian Magnificent Maple Leafs. If we don't have any in stock, I personally have some and will give my own 10-ounce Magnificent Maple Leaf.
No, I'll buy it from you. This one's on me. I do appreciate that. Although we'll find by the time maybe we'll give it away on New Year's Eve. Ooh, so someone goes into the new year with a nice 10-ounce silver piece, we'll call it for now. But anyway, the link is in the description field below. Or if you just want to get these updates every day, so goes right to your inbox, and that way you can stay tuned with the other fun events. We got a lot of in-person meetups coming in 2021, Andy. Did you know that?
God willing. Yeah, I cannot wait for that. I can think of nothing more that I would rather do than give you a hug and shake the hands of people that we had the good fortune of meeting on Silverfest and talk to throughout the year. I think everyone out there would really like the ability to do something as crazy as meet together and socialize within 6 feet of one another and do something as reckless and dangerous as shake someone's hand. So you can count me on the list of already saying, yes, I will be there if it's all humanly possible.
Click on that link in the description field below, Andy, so you'll have a chance to get in on this, or at least stay posted. And I know what you mean with the in-person events, because I've heard, especially after Silverfest and going to other conferences, and people are grateful, but everyone keeps saying, oh, it'd be great to be in person. Yet we're not talking about achieving absolute zero here. I mean, there's places it can be done, and I'm on it, everybody. So stay tuned for more information. You go click that link below. And then if we do have our New Year's Austin Arcadia party, which is currently up for debate this week, but if we do have it, that way you'll know about it. Maybe you can pick up your 10-ounce silver piece there. Andy, I thank you for everything this year. I guess this is our last call of 2020. So great year it's been. And next year, a lot to look forward to.
Chris, I thank you as well. I look very forward to it. You can always count on me. I'll be here when you need me 24/7. And you are a good friend. You are very good at what you do. You are a treasure to the industry. Please know that everyone I talk to has nothing but the most respect and fondness for what you are doing. I'm so proud to be a part of it. I look forward to picking up where we left off in 2021. And all the best to your listeners, the best of what the holidays can bring in such a crazy year. Happy, healthy New Year to everyone. And I'll look forward to picking up with you real soon, Chris. You take care, my friend.
Well, gee, that's kind of you to say that. Appreciate that, Andy. Thank you for everything. And folks, go click that link below so you can stay tuned for all the good stuff. And with that said, we will see you again tomorrow night.